Bring in show music, please.
This is Squawk Pod from CNBC. I'm producer Cameron Costa, and on today's episode, the word on Wall Street. New York Post correspondent Lydia Moynihan shares finances sentiment on the Kamala Harris campaign.
Even though she's newer to the national stage, is the top of the ticket, they feel they got to know her over the past few years, develop a relationship with her.
And what they're all eyeing, whoever takes the White House.
All of these Wall Street guys dream of one day growing up and becoming Treasury Secretary.
We take a look at consumer spending and Donald Trump's latest comments on the Fed with CNBC's Steve Liesman.
The Fed has plenty of flaws, and there's plenty of room for reform there. But it's worth pointing out that the way the Fed is constructed is in a way that reflects our values and our culture as a country.
Plus, the Delta, CrowdStrike, Microsoft blame game, and a special interview from the Olympics.
We're going to head to Paris.
Yep, some of our CNBC crew is still on the ground. Quintanilla sits down with Jessica Berman, commissioner of the National Women's Soccer League.
We've had expansion. We're now in 14 cities across the U.S. and continuing to expand with 2 more teams joining in 2026.
It's Friday, August 9th, 2024, and Squawk Pod begins right now.
Stand Andrew by in 3, 2, 1, cue Andrew.
Good morning and welcome to Squawk Box on this Friday morning here on CNBC. We are live at the NASDAQ market site in Times Square. I'm Andrew Ross Sorkin, along with Melissa Lee, who's in for Joe and Becky. The market's continuing to claw back from losses from Monday's sell-off. It is a clawback of sorts. I don't know which the jobless claims number, the unemployment number. What are we supposed to look at?
Think about it, Andrew. You've done the show for a long time. When have jobless claims really been a market mover? I would probably say 0
Very
times.
rarely.
Exactly. There you have it. On Fast Money, we were saying, never in the history of Fast Money have we started talking about jobless claims and the impact on the markets.
So does that mean that this is a head fake and that the market's looking for anything?
Any reason. And the idea that the yen carry trade has been mostly deleveraged. I mean, I heard an estimate of 3/4, deleveraged in terms of that trade being liquidated. So that's an important milestone to hit as well in terms of, that's a finite amount of deleveraging that's going to go on. And if most of it has happened, then you've reached sort of an equilibrium.
So what are you saying the all is clear? Or are you saying this is a head fake? What are you saying?
I'm not saying it's all. I'm not saying. I think that. Don't you think that the reaction to the jobs report was a little bit extreme?
It feels that way.
Exactly.
So that's a head fake then.
Perhaps. We'll see.
We'll see what happens today.
Exactly.
Meantime, if you were watching Squawk on Monday during the global market sell-off, we had Wharton professor Jeremy Siegel calling for the Fed to make an emergency rate cut.
This may surprise people. I'm calling for a 75 basis point emergency cut in the Fed funds rate with another 75 basis point cut indicated for next month at the September meeting. And that's minimum.
Now the professor is backing off that call. Siegel saying it's no longer vital for an emergency rate cut, but he still wants Fed policymakers to move quickly and aggressively. I don't know if aggressively means September 25 basis points. That's probably not aggressive. 50 basis points maybe in September. That's aggressive?
It seems like it was open-ended for a reason. If you're going to call for 75 on Monday and then flip basically days afterward, what does it tell you about that call initially? It was a knee-jerk reaction.
Well, and that's what's been happening all week.
Exactly. When you see economists on Wall Street flip their expectations, flip their forecasts for what they want or what they see the Fed doing based on one single data point, when Jeremy Powell said specifically, we will be data dependent, not data point dependent.
Okay, so what do you think? So then, what do you think of what Goldman Sachs said last week, and what do you say about what J.P. Morgan said this week?
In terms, both of them are increasing their probability for a recession. Yeah,
based on this data.
On data point. That's the probability is still low. I mean, Goldman moved to 25%. Right. J.P. Morgan moved to 35%. It's not like we're moving from 25% to 70%. But their expectations of what the Fed would do in response to one data point is sort of an extreme change, I thought.
Delta Airlines launching the latest salvo in the blame game surrounding last month's global IT outage. Now, the airline is saying that CrowdStrike's global IT outage cost it $500 million, including $380 million in revenue due to canceled flights and customer compensation through cash and Sky Miles, the company reiterating plans to sue CrowdStrike and Microsoft for those damages, calling the disruption, quote, unacceptable. Now, CrowdStrike says this narrative is misleading, while Microsoft says that Delta doesn't have the technology to withstand that kind of outage. Really a he said, she said situation that will, if this goes to court, you'll find out. You'll know. Were all of these Microsoft and CrowdStrike systems, or were they other systems? So Microsoft CrowdStrike says, look, yes, we had our problem over here,
right?
But Delta had not just us in this group, but they had a whole daisy chain of other software over here. Now, we may have helped knock that out, but most other airlines didn't have the same problem because they hadn't daisy chained them in the same way and hadn't used outdated technology and the like. Of course, Delta says not so. We need to find out who's telling the truth.
Right. Well, yesterday after the bell, in response to this, CrowdStrike had a statement saying effectively, we offered all this help.
Right.
And they supposedly had emails. So it'll be interesting to see what was documented in terms of the offers of help and the responses to those offers,
right,
if there were offers. And I guess that'll be sort of a linchpin there. Vice President Harris and former President Trump will be facing off in a debate. On September 10th, Trump also says he wants additional debates before the election. The July CNBC NRF Retail Monitor out this morning, painting a picture of the health of the consumer. Steve Liesman joins us now with more on that. Steve, what does it reveal?
Good growth in 10 of 12 spending categories. The data are offering some confidence that the economy and consumer are keeping their momentum going in the summer here. Total retail sales ex auto and gas, that's their first measure here, up 0.7%, a bit better than the 0.5 from the prior month. Year on year did come down, though, up 0.9 compared to 3.4% in June. Core retail, which is what we call core retail, takes out restaurants as well, up a pretty healthy 1%, better than the 0.3 in June. The year over year 1.7 compared with 3.1 in June. Now, the CNBC NRF data derived from real credit card spending during the month, gathered and crunched by our friends at Affinity Solutions. It looks to have been helped by back-to-school spending, even on furniture like furnishing those dorms, and those online sales promotions like Prime Day that happened in July. We're showing a bit more strength for the consumer. NRF economists say consumers remain cautious but are still spending where they find value and say there remains a focus on value and price. Economists polled by Reuters look for a 0.3% gain in the headline retail sales numbers. That comes out Thursday by census, just 0.1 ex autos. After that weak Friday jobs report, markets have been hungry for any data showing whether the broader economy is weakening or if the July report was an outlier. The retail monitor suggests rumors of the economy's demise are premature. Andrew?
Steve, before we move on, I want to tell you about a different story, or want to ask you really about a different story, which I'm sure you saw former President Trump holding that press conference in Mar-a-Lago yesterday, where the subject of interest rates and the Fed's independence came up. I want to show you some of that tape.
I feel the president should have at least say in there. Yeah, I feel that strongly. I think that in my case, I made a lot of money. I was very successful. And I think I have a better instinct than in many cases people that would be on the Federal Reserve or the chairman.
So back in April, you remember the Journal reported that advisors close to the former president would be looking at a series of changes to the central bank should he regain the White House in November. Then there were other people telling us, Steve, that he really wasn't interested in that. Now we have it on tape to some degree. What do you think of this?
Well, I would suggest that the former president take a look at Turkey. That would be a good place to start if you want to put up the Turkish lira there, and you can see what happens to a country's currency when the president can dictate what happens. There's been study after study showing that a central bank's independence leads to better outcomes for the currency and the economy. That's in the first thing. The second question I guess I'd have is which particular instinct is Donald Trump talking about? The smart instinct that bought Mar-a-Lago and built Trump Tower, or the one that did, Trump University, or the one that built the Atlantic City Casino? The third thing I would say, Andrew, is the Fed has plenty of flaws, and there's plenty of room for reform there. But it's worth pointing out that the way the Fed is constructed is in a way that reflects our values and our culture as a country. You have a Kansas City Fed that has an equal voice to a Chicago Fed, that has an equal voice to an Atlanta Fed. You have Washington and New York balancing with Chicago. It's a real balance of who we are as a country. Not that you couldn't reform it. For example, San Francisco is a ridiculously large one. Why are there two Federal Reserve banks in Missouri? But ultimately, what you have is a reflection of, well, what's the best way to do this? Yeah, you could probably have, in any case, Andrew, if you have the right dictator come in and make laws more quickly than our Congress could. But if that's the way you want to do it, I'm not sure. So it causes great concern. And I just wonder how the people who support the president, especially on the business side, kind of rationalize this kind of talk.
Oh, well, let me ask you. I think the rationalization would be that presidents historically have actually tried in their own way, oftentimes more privately, to influence the Fed. They just haven't done it as openly. And the question, of course, is, does he want to actually fundamentally change its independence and the actual structure of it? Or is he saying, I just want to have a say and I'm going to talk more about it? And that, frankly, other presidents were doing that all along. They just never did it out loud. They said the quiet part out loud.
Well, you're right. You're right. We don't know what exactly he means by this, but that's sort of a problem. Harris doesn't talk, and that's a huge problem. Trump talks, and we're not sure what he's saying, and that's a big problem. So I would, put a box on both houses when it comes to that. If you're going to talk about Fed independence, well, from a market standpoint, we'd certainly like you to talk with more detail and what exactly you're talking about. And I shouldn't, by the way, just go to Turkey for examples of the problems of Fed independence. Look at what happened in the United States under Burns when he knuckled under to Nixon and to other politicians when it came to making U.S. policy and the inflation that resulted from that. If you're a president, what do you want? You want essentially low interest rates all the time, and you don't want to take the hard decisions or have anybody take the hard decisions that would slow the economy, especially coming up to an election, et cetera. And that's why you got the inflation that you had. And that's pretty much why one of the reasons we have a Fed system that is an attempt to be insulated from politics. I don't believe it's entirely insulated from politics. They're obviously the members of the Federal Reserve Board. They live in the culture. They live in the society. They are certainly influenced by it. But very much the way you try to create and insulate the Supreme Court, you've done the same thing with the Federal Reserve. Right. It does, however, report to Congress. And the idea that there could be more transparency, more accountability, I think that's a fair criticism.
Okay. Steve, want to thank you. Appreciate it very, very much. Have a great weekend, my friend.
Cheese will be next.
Up next on Squawk Pod, how Kamala Harris is being received on Wall Street. New York Post financial correspondent Lydia Moynihan.
She is a candidate where sort of like a Rorschach test. People see what they want to see. They can look at somebody like her and see she's very progressive, but then people on Wall Street say, no, she's very reasonable.
You're listening to Squawk Pod.
You're watching Squawk Box on CNBC on this, we'll call it Summer Friday. I'm Andrew Ross Sorkin along with Melissa Lee. Joe and Becky are off today. There are now 88 days left until the presidential election. Both campaigns looking for support from Wall Street. And joining us right now is Lydia Moynihan, New York Post financial correspondent. Good morning to you.
Great to see you on this Summer Friday.
Summer Friday. What do you think is going to happen here? What are you hearing? What's everybody telling you?
An open-ended question. Look,
yes.
I mean, Wall Street is all in on Kamala Harris. And what's interesting is they kind of feel a sense of responsibility for having her in there in the first place because they credit themselves correctly or incorrectly for Biden's ouster because obviously donors halting donations was a key part of that. So now they feel like she's their person. Do I think?
You think all of them?
I'm not going to paint with a broad brush. Look, Wall Street extends to Florida, to Ken Griffin, to Steve Schwartz. But you look at some of the bigger folks like a Blair Efron and Mark Lazary. There is a concerted effort led by financiers on Wall Street to, and again, not a lot of time left, but we are looking at an effort. People want to donate in October. They want to donate in September to really sustain that momentum. And a lot of these folks met her, like a Lazary, like an Efron, back when she was running for president in 2020. So they feel that they've known her, even though she's newer to the national stage, is the top of the ticket. They feel they got to know her over the past few years, develop a relationship with her the last time she ran for president. And that's continued.
Here's the second part to the question then. There's been a frustration, as you know, especially among Wall Street Democrats, about the Biden administration's regulatory regime. All these bankers who can't do these mergers and other deals and things like that. This group of people who you say are all in now on Harris would love for her to tack to the center, at least on regulatory issues. Do you think that she will, and how is that influence
And those
playing?
tax cuts are sunsetting next year as well. That's front and center of everyone's mind. Because a lot of these people feel like and this is painting with a broad brush, some of these financiers feel they've known her for long enough. They feel confident that she's a little malleable. And it's a fascinating question. I've asked them this as well, is if you look at her time in the Senate, she had a more progressive voting record than almost anyone.
Right.
And you would never see them rallying behind Bernie Sanders. But I think because they feel like they have a relationship with her at this point, and they point to her time as a DA and somebody who was building relationships with people in California, they feel confident at some level that she's going to maybe have a lighter touch on regulation. It's an interesting situation. She is a candidate where it's sort of like a Rorschach test. People see what they want to see. They can look at somebody like her and see she's very progressive, but then people on Wall Street say, no, she's very reasonable. She gets it. She knows what the private sector is. I know her. I like her. I've known her for years. And they're confident that she's the best person for the job.
It's almost a benefit that Joe Biden stepped aside so late in the game.
Yes.
So that there's less time to actually flesh out what Harris stands for, and whether she's just an extension of Biden or if she is her own person. What is your sense? I mean, you said Rorschach test, and so we don't really know. Do we know that does she like Lena Khan? Does she, it's
So that's a big thing, is we are saying, I mean, Lena Khan is obviously a very controversial person. We've seen Reid Hoffman, some of these people who are very publicly calling for Khan's ouster. Like you mentioned, I think she is just trying to be really cautious and not say anything too dramatic either way. And I think she's kind of leaning into the fact, she hasn't done an interview yet. I think she's embracing this honeymoon phase that people have. And you're right, the fact that she is so new to the game, when you juxtapose her with Biden, who was, at this very senile, quite a bit older, she is young and vigorous, and I think people are just excited about all of that.
Is your sense that she's somebody that Wall Street ultimately, that the Bill Ackmans of the world, now Bill Ackman's not turning back, meaning Bill Ackman said, remember, because the reason I'm going with this is Bill Ackman originally said, Biden should step down. Now, he started with the Biden should step down, not I'm voting for Trump, but just Biden should step down, there should be some other alternative. And then he moved to Trump, and then the question is, but there was a bunch of people who moved that way. Are any of those people moving back? Maybe that's the way I'd ask it.
I don't think that they're going to publicly backtrack in a really aggressive way. I think they had a moment where they were at the RNC where you saw mostly a lot of Silicon Valley types. They felt like J.D. Vance was their guy because he was a venture capitalist. Now I think some of that excitement has dimmed a little bit, but I think these people feel they're too far into the Trump campaign to take a step back. And I also think at this point, you always want to bet on a winning horse. And so if you've already made an investment in one campaign, you kind of want to stick with it. And of course, all of these Wall Street guys dream of one day growing up and becoming Treasury Secretary. And I think likewise, on the Trump side, they're eager to push their agenda with crypto.
Well, that's where I was going to go crypto next.
Oh, I thought you were going to go Treasury Secretary.
That was going to be my.
I think that's the.
That was going to be my finale. But
okay. I didn't mean to steal your thunder.
No.
We can do a little 1-2 punch.
Okay, the 1-2 on crypto first. She apparently is reaching out, or at least people on her team reaching out to people in crypto land who had moved to Trump. Is that is there any movement there, or is that a self-defeating?
So it's interesting. There was a bit of a kerfuffle because, as you know, Trump spoke at the Bitcoin conference.
Right.
One of her staffers, had reached out to the organizers of the conference about her speaking. And so there was a lot of hope that she's going to make an appearance. Whether or not that was because of a campaign conflict or what it is, she wasn't able to go and attend in person, but there was interest. There's also been an effort among Congressman Ro Khanna, Scaramucci, some of these other Democratic pro-crypto types to kind of make it a bigger tent party. Kamala hasn't really embraced that yet at this point in the way that obviously the Republicans have, where they've literally put it in their platform that they want to be pro-crypto. Understand that there was this Zoom meeting that was held that was trying to get people, Democrats and crypto types on board. It didn't go super smoothly, so I think that's sort of a concerted effort, but I don't know that that's really landed where they would like to see that land.
Here's the second part of the 1-2 punch, the finale. Treasury Secretary in a Harris administration. Who is it?
Who's closest to buying it?
Who's closest? Well, the people leading the charge on Wall Street, you have Ray McGuire, you have Blair Efron, you have
they're the
Lazary
major donors.
Yeah, and they're really putting themselves front and center. but who she chooses remains to be seen. Jamie Dimon's name is always floated.
Here's what I'm going to say.
Who do you think?
I'm going to say that I think that her first pick, if she had her own, up to her own volition, she actually would try to get Jamie Dimon to do it. Whether he'd do it or not, I think is a question. I think after that, she'd actually pick a Gina Raimondo kind of person, which I actually think, and I have I have a huge amount of respect for Gina Raimondo. I think a Ray McGuire, maybe a Commerce, something like that. I don't know where a Mark Lazary or a Blair Efron land in this,
political environment.
In that world.
I don't think Jamie Dimon would want it. I don't think he wants
to
answer
interesting.
to anybody.
Why wouldn't he want it?
I think that he doesn't want to answer to anybody.
Okay, so
really?
I disagree. I actually
You think somebody could turn that job down? I feel like secretly everyone
I think he would.
has
I
a
actually
dream.
think that. I think he would. I think potentially this.
It could be it.
Yeah, and the timing kind of works. The new building is going to be up on Park Avenue.
It's time for him to step,
there's been talk.
It's a legacy.
Yeah.
Sure.
And by the way, if you got a lot of stock and you want to put it into Treasury, is a great opportunity. Meaning, no, when you leave and you go to the White House, the tax benefit, at least in the immediate term, is quite remarkable. Okay, Lydia.
Public service.
Thank you for coming in on a summer Friday in your whites, no less.
Summer whites, winter whites.
Right, winter whites.
Whichever way it goes. Great to see you, Andrew.
Appreciate it. Thank you,
Thanks, Melissa. Bye.
Coming up next on Squawk Pod, the business of women's sports. Commissioner of the National Women's Soccer League, Jessica Berman, is making her pitch to investors and to fans on a global stage at the Olympics in Paris.
The growth is there, and the enterprise value, I think, demonstrates that. And it's rooted in actual data that is based on revenues and a real business that's been built around this incredible game.
Welcome back to Squawk Pod, where we're bringing you one more interview. And this one happened right near the Arc de Triomphe, in the thick of the Olympics.
I want to head to Paris now, as many of the finals about to take place, from basketball to the soccer pitch. And Carl Quintanilla joins us right now. I think he's got an old friend of mine there, too.
Really? Oh, interesting. Jessica says hello, I'm sure.
Hi, Andrew.
Jessica Berman, Commissioner of the National Women's Soccer League. It's great to have you. Welcome.
It's great to be here.
The toss, of course, is about tomorrow's match. U.S. women take on Brazil in the gold medal match. Huge game. What's on the line in terms of delivering engagement for the sport over the long term? What's on the line tomorrow?
Well, I think just the fact that they're playing in the gold medal match allows for us to capitalize on the incredible momentum of this team and their performance. And it really is a new generation of players that has captured the attention of the average American to realize that the next generation of the U.S. women's national team is formidable and here to compete and competing to be the best in the world. Of course, if they win gold, it takes it to another level. But I think this is a win for our league and for the U.S. women's national team, regardless.
We've talked, as a business network, we've talked so much about women's sports this year. WNBA, a great example. But I still think that it was women's soccer that sort of pushed those boundaries first. Is that fair?
From my perspective, having spent my whole career in men's sports, and when I came over into this league to be the commissioner 2.5 years ago, I said the unique thing about women's soccer is that it's one of the few sports that when you're American and you close your eyes and think of greatness and soccer, you actually think of women. And there is no other team sport where that is true. And I think that gives us a running advantage as it relates to American fandom and sports. And American sports fans love to cheer for the best in the world. And we are the best in the world. And this is another testament to that.
Right. Viewers may not know about what's happened with viewership and ratings. World Cup from 2019 to 2023 was up 70%?
Correct.
How is that? What makes that happen? Is it about the personalities on the team, or is it about some sort of marketing firepower that you're using behind the scenes?
I think it's all of the above. It definitely starts with the players and the product. As I said, we need to be the best in the world in order for people to care in our country. We know that there's huge competition for attention of the average consumer and American sports fan, and there's a lot of great product out there. We believe we're the best in the world, and if you love watching the best in the world at the World Cup or at the Olympics, you can actually watch these athletes compete in our league. On the pitch tomorrow in the gold medal game, we will have 27 athletes competing. So 19 on the U.S. women's national team and 8 on the Brazilian team. And so the best in the world, aside from the U.S. women's national team, actually play in the National Women's Soccer League. And for American sports fans to know that and recognize that, and they already are actually, our viewership, even our professional league, is up 30% year over year. Attendance is up incredible double digits growth year over year, over 50%. And we've had expansion. We're now in 14 cities across the U.S. and continuing to expand with 2 more teams joining in 2026. So we're super excited about the growth. And for the first time, we actually have a professional league that's ready to capitalize on the momentum of the Olympics.
So is the next story about valuation? We talked a lot about Iger and Willow Bay and Angel City. Do you think that's the next chapter in the story?
Well, I think that chapter is already being written. 2 years ago, teams were selling for $5 million. We sold an expansion team in 2023 for $53 million. And this year, as you mentioned, Willow Bay and Bob Iger bought Angel City for $250 million. So the growth is there, and the enterprise value, I think, demonstrates that. And it's rooted in actual data that is based on revenues and a real business that's been built around this incredible game.
Right. Finally, thoughts about Paris, the job they did here, and what's on the line for LA in 28?
Well, we're really excited because I think for the first time we've been able to see the youth of our league in the National Women's Soccer League displayed on the pitch with the U.S. Women's National Team. So the players who are performing at their best and leading the charge in these games are actually the youth of our league. And this is the next generation of stars. So when you think about it, I think they coined themselves, Sophia Smith, Mal Swanson, and Trinity Rodden call themselves triple espresso. I think they said that, not me. Those are the next generation of talent. They're the front 3. Everyone is super excited to watch them. And it's our job at the league to make sure that we have the professionalized environment to really ingest their stardom and their greatness and make sure we're there to support them with a professionalized training environment, with 20,000 fans per game, and really giving them a chance to continue to thrive and grow and develop as the best in the world.
Right. Well, all eyes will be on them tomorrow. That's for sure.
We'll be there.
Yes. Jessica, thanks for coming in. Great to see you. Andrew, the incredible epic comeback in men's basketball last night.
Yeah, we got to talk about that. That was unbelievable.
Yes. I was just looking at the Journal piece today. I think that the headline is they almost blew it. But being down 13 at the beginning of the third, it's been talked about a lot here this morning.
Excellent. We're looking forward to it, Carl. Thank you. Appreciate it.
That's the podcast for today and for the week. Thank you for listening. If you want more Olympics interviews, scroll in your Squawk Pod feed to last week. There are so many good episodes to choose from, including conversations with LVMH chairman Bernard Arnault, Olympian Ilona Maher, Olympian turned investor Serena Williams. They're all great, and they're all waiting for you. Our TV broadcast, Squawk Box, is hosted by Joe Kernan, Becky Quick, and Andrew Ross Sorkin, weekday mornings on CNBC starting at 6 a.m. Eastern. You can find the highlights of that show and so much more if you follow us here on Squawk Pod wherever you're listening. We'll meet you back here on Monday, and have a great weekend.
We are clear. Thanks, guys.